Mark from the Institute of Vehicle Recovery. A slightly different camera angle today from our workshop to say thank you to our industry supporters. We couldn't do this without you, and we've popped their names up on the board as a thank you to you. So this morning we're going to talk about something that is very important to rescue recovery industry and the transport industry in general, and that is daily defect checks. But what I want to do first of all is just pick up on the new government guidelines on social distancing. We can now be 1 metre from somebody else. We still need to consider wearing a face covering and all of the relevant PPE. However, British transport guidelines are still suggesting that we stay within 2 metres of another person if we work in the transport or passenger industry. So we would still refer you back to our other films and the protocols and the guidance in those films. If this is the first time that you've seen this film, then follow the link and watch the series from the beginning. So as always, guys, we've had some really great questions come in from you over lots of different mediums. And some people have even chosen to find me on Facebook and ask questions over that. And we're going to try as best as we can to answer all of those questions. They've all been really positive. They've all worked well in terms of trying to get into the spirit of what we're trying to achieve here, and really thank you for that. Okay, so the first question that we got asked was why did I choose to use a short secondary restraint when winching my mum onto the back of the recovery truck? The question was if the towing eye was to snap, then the secondary restraint would stop the car, but if the winch rope was to snap, then it would not support the car in any way. And this is a great question, and you're always tied up with what do you use? Do you use a long secondary restraint, a short one, the different types and styles that are on the market? I chose to use a short secondary restraint at that point in time because my winch rope is in very good condition, and it's always inspected, and we'll lead on to that shortly in the film. I also calculate every load that's being pulled onto the back of the truck, and you would be able to do this yourself off the back of an IVR VR training course and work with your instructors on that. Secondly, we felt that if the towing eye was to snap, then it would only be a short distance before the secondary restraint caught it. If we used a long secondary restraint and the towing eye was to snap, then that car would travel the entire length of the bed, and that could have been quite a frightening experience for the customer. So that's my risk assessment, and that's not any different to anybody else's. That's not better than anybody else's. That was the one that I came up with at the time. That was me being responsible for the actions that I was taking at that time, and that ultimately would lead to your professionalism. We also had another question, or questioning the indicator speed on my vehicle in the film. It flashes quickly, and the suggestion again was that perhaps I had not done my daily defect checks. This is not the case, and we're going to show you that in a little while. The truck that we use, the DAF, the little LF, has had just recently some LED rear lights fitted, and there is no resistance to flash the indicator in the cab at the correct speed. And we'll show you that in a second when we go outside. What it's going to lead into, though, guys, all of these questions, is what we're going to base this film around today, and that is making sure that you are doing your daily defect checks, checking your equipment, making sure it's all up to spec, and just going back over the PPE that we now may require and have with us in the cab. And what we're going to do, we're going to film this in real time. Just the other side of the sliding door there of our workshop is the recovery truck in the yard, and we're going to go out there and we'll do a daily defect check for real, in real time. This is the check that I use. This is the paperwork that I use. And this, we will again put a link at the bottom of this video for you to be able to download. This is from the Institute of Vehicle Recovery. I've just got my company logo at the top. It's 1 week's worth of daily defect checks. On the rear, it lists out the days, and it enables you to write down any defects that you may have. You may find a defect on your truck. That might not mean that the vehicle is off the road, though. It may mean that you just need to keep a record on it, that you're monitoring it and maintaining it, and you'll replace those parts or repair those parts as time goes on. But this is a legal requirement. It doesn't have to be in paper format. It can be on your PDA, and I know that a lot of VROs out there are using the electronic formatting. The legal requirement is that you must do a daily defect on any commercial vehicle or any multiple use vehicle prior to it going out on the road. And that also, guys, includes your equipment. And what we feel is that you're very good as VROs of checking your trucks and making sure that the truck is okay, but some of the equipment that we see as instructors as we're traveling around the country is not up to the standard that we would expect. And we're going to point out a few of those little things for you as we go through. So, daily defect check. We're going to go outside to the recovery truck, and the acronym that the IVR likes to use is FLOWER, F-L-O-W-E-R, and each one of those letters refers to an element of the truck that you would check. So the first one is fuel. Okay, so you need to make sure that you've obviously got enough fuel in your vehicle to enable you to complete the task. You could add to that if you're carrying maybe diesel cans of fuel for customers that have run out of fuel at the side of the road. So you would add, if you're driving a service van, that your fuel cans are full and that kind of thing. L is for lights, and obviously headlights and rear lights and indicators are the main thing that you would be looking to check. But include your beacons, any secondary lighting that you have on there on the vehicle, and that could even mean any kind of work light or handheld torch that you're using as you're doing your job. O is for oil. Engine oil would be the obvious one that would spring to mind there, but so would hydraulic oil. Okay, so making sure that your oil tank for your hydraulic system is at the correct level. W is for water. Engine water and coolant, again, would be maybe the obvious one. But what about your washer bottle for your windscreen? It could even be that as it's a hot day at this moment in time, you need some water in the cab for your own consumption. E used to be electrics, and we now include electrics within our lights. E now is for equipment, and this is your ancillary equipment, your straps and your strops and your brothers and your secondary restraints and snatch blocks and so on and so forth. I did an instructor update a few days ago, and one of the instructors came up with E for everything else, which I thought was a really good way of putting it. So check everything else that you have on the truck. And then R, finally, for rubber, which is your tyres. And not just that the tread depths are in good condition, but look at the sidewalls and remember that inner tyre on your rear axle or axles. Make sure that they're inflated and they're in good condition. Again, guys, this is a legal requirement. And as you drive that vehicle out onto the public highway, you take responsibility for it as a professional driver. So I'm just going to bring your attention to this. One of the things that you, as a VRO, will need to know is all of the capacities and the capabilities of the vehicle that you're about to drive. Now, in a lot of cases, these are marked on the equipment and on the truck itself, and I will show you those markings on our truck when we get out there. One of the things that we produce for all our vehicles at Recovery Safe is a laminate that goes with the board that stays within the lorry. And we just list down there the payload of the truck, the spec lift's payload, and then the truck that we've got outside actually has 2 winches on it, and we list the winch capacity and the winch rope safe working load. What we also laminate and print on the back is our winch calculation charts. And again, the IVR produces one slightly different to ours, but I will put a little link down below this so that you can print off your winch calculation chart from the IVR. If you really want to know how to use this, guys, and use it to the best of your ability, then you need to really go to an IVR training instructor and do the relevant VR module based around the vehicle that you will be using. This really does help if you use this on every job. I know it can be sometimes a little bit complicated for you guys that have already done it, but use it. It works fantastically well, and it enables you to produce in your own mind the correct dynamic risk assessment for what you're trying to achieve. A point that we want to make to you guys and girls is that these videos should never be a substitute for a training course. They are really for your guidance, and they're your CPD, a continual personal development. They're a go-to if you've forgotten something or you just want a little reminder. We would always encourage you to do the IVR VR modular training that is required for the style and type of vehicle that you use, or the contract that you have in place. Training will ultimately lead to your professionalism. Treat it as an asset. It enables you to gain extra knowledge. It reduces damage. It reduces damage to not only your business that you may work for, but ultimately you may end up having to pay for. And it will give you a sense of worth. If you treat training correctly, and you gain the relevant knowledge to enable you to do your job within your industry, you will gain a sense of worth. I know that from personal experience because I wasn't born with this knowledge. I learnt this from stalwarts of the industry back in the day, and I'm just carrying on the mantle, if you like. And I'm continually learning new things, not just from instructors or people seen at the higher end of our industry, but from you guys. The questions that you ask sometimes make me have to think, and it works really well. So we encourage you to look to increase your training, and the IVR VR modular system really will work. Morning. Welcome to my little yard. The truck has been parked here overnight. We're going to do this in real time. We know that we had an issue with it a few days ago where the ignition barrel had actually collapsed whilst my son was using it. So we've got a defect check in there that says that, and a rectification sheet which we'll show you in a little while. But what we're going to do, guys, is we're going to start to fill in this form. So I've just popped the registration number down today and today's date, and then we'll have a look at the mileage, and we fill this in with the mileage of every day. Today is Tuesday, so we're going to use Tuesday's column, and we put a tick if the component is in good condition, and we'll put a little X if it's not. And if we find something that is not correct, then what we'll do on the reverse is on Tuesday we will write down what is actually wrong. If that vehicle is then VOR, vehicle off the road, or whether we can still continue to use it with the defect. Operator then would sign it here, and if you've got a supervisor or manager, he would then sign it on from there. There's a little section at the bottom of this form, guys, because you might have two drivers within a day. So you may have somebody that uses it in the morning and then somebody else that uses it in the afternoon. That would need two defect checks. Okay, so let's start. The best place to start if you're going to do anything with a truck is to dip the engine oil. So now that we know that the engine oil is okay, we can now start the engine, and that will allow us then to operate and use the rest of the equipment on the truck. So just a quick point, somebody mentioned that the indicators were flashing very quickly in the lorry. So if we just bring the camera in, we can see on the dashboard that the indicators are flashing quickly. Just come on around the back of the lorry. You can see that they're flashing actually. And that we've had some fancy LED lights put to the rear. Okay guys, so whilst we're at the cab part, we'll just show you what we carry in this lorry for our daily work. We'll start at the door. So in the door pocket here we've got some spare batteries for the LODAR remote system. We've got some extra goggles, and at this moment in time the all-important hand wash. Just climb into the cab for you. Makes it a little bit easier to talk. So just down here on the right hand side we have our heavy duty work gloves. We've got our little cloth that we use for the engine oil, and then just behind the seat there, I don't know if you know, we've got some brand new spare straps just in case something happens whilst we're on the job. So we've got two bed straps. I just want to point out what we would check when we're looking for damage, or whether these guys are serviceable. this is an older strap that was originally on this truck, and the first point I want to make is that the tag is now missing. Secondly, as we start to go through the strap, we can see that here there's some damage, and it doesn't look that bad when you kind of look at it in this respect, but if you start to open it up, you can clearly see that the strap has been cut and frayed. This strap is to be removed. This cannot be used to secure down the vehicle. This is a slightly newer strap, and we can see here that we've got a tag, and it clearly gives the information that an operator would need. When we look through the strap, we can see that it's in used condition. There's a few marks and different bits, and it's a little bit dirty in places. However, it is in very good condition. This strap can be used. This one must be discarded. So I said earlier we've been having some great questions, and we've just had a great question from the camera team here. So would we be checking all of this equipment before we go out every morning? Look, the answer is if I've not seen this truck for a little while, or it's the first time I've used it ever, then yes, I would check every single piece of equipment prior to me using it. If it's a truck that I'm using regularly, or it's one that is allocated to me, then I would check the equipment when I put it away. That way, then I wouldn't need to check it every single time. And it's just about you getting used to it. So we've got to put a real kind of spin on this in some ways, guys, is that if I'd never used this truck, or I hadn't used it for the last 2 or 3 days, and I was coming to it now to go and do a job, then I would be checking every single piece of its equipment. I don't know what job I'm going to be faced with until it actually happens. If, like I do, I use this truck regularly myself, or all the time, mainly myself, then I check it when I'm putting the equipment away as well. So all I need to do is drop the locker and make sure that I haven't left something behind, or it's still there, or that somebody hasn't stolen it. A point I'd just quickly like to make when we get to checking our levers and hydraulics and so on and so forth is the importance of an emergency stop. This truck actually has 4 emergency stops on it, one on the remote control system, which is still in the cab, 2 on the front and 1 here, and they're all linked together. And at this point you need to check that they're working. So we would just start to slide the bed off, push our e-stop in, make sure it's okay, and then a quick twist, and everything should now come back to life. We've just seen a defect check, guys, on my recovery truck. We do this every single time that this vehicle goes out. We use these defects as a record for our 10 weekly inspections. So when the truck comes in for inspection, the first thing that the technician would get, which is again my son, he would grab these defects, and that gives him a clear indication as to what he might have to look to fix first. If a defect is found, and we'll show you the records of the lorry in a second, then he will give a rectification notice as well. He will write out a rectification sheet that will sit with the defect, so that we get a clear record of the maintenance on this recovery vehicle. Any receipts, any new parts, anything like that we also purchase, also then sits in the truck records. And the final thing that we're going to show you when we go in there in a moment is that every year all of our equipment has a LOLA inspection, lifting operations, lifting equipment inspection, and that's done by an independent person, and those records are also kept within the vehicle's history, so that we can clearly show as an operator, as a recovery operator, that we are doing the utmost to maintain our professionalism and meet the standards that are set within our industry and the transport industry. Okay, so you've just seen what we would do in terms of a daily check outside on our recovery truck, and using the IVR paperwork to aid us, and what we would do with our truck file. I'd really like to just point out the fact that you need to press the subscribe button. If you do that, you will be first to be alerted for any new content that we put on, any new videos that are coming up. We're really pleased with the way that you like and share that on Facebook, and we'd encourage you to continue with that. So what we would now do is, this record would stay with the truck. We'd keep this for the whole week in the lorry. In fact, we might store 2 or 3 weeks worth of these. Eventually, they would make their way to our office, and this is our truck's records. So in here, we would have a folder with all of the previous checks that have gone on over this year. Once it gets to a year, it tends to go back into our storage. So that will eventually end up in there. If there are any defects, then what would happen is we get a rectification. So our technicians would write a rectification. So what have we got here? Hydraulic tank was insecure, adjusted and fixed back into place. So one of these defects will say that it's got an insecure hydraulic tank, and then this would then be put in its place. And we tend to use the RHA books to do our defect report. So those two would sit hand in hand. This folder is obviously our documents for the vehicle. Any new parts that we fitted on, our inspection plates and MOTs and so on and so forth. It's had a registration change, and then there's some old Lola reports there, and we'll come on to those in a second because our new ones are on top, and that just goes in there. So these are our Lola inspections done by a fantastic IVR instructor, Mr. Peter Martin, and he does a 12-monthly independent inspection. So if he feels that there's anything wrong, he will give me the report, and it's up to me then to deal with it. Those records also stay with the truck. We also have our declaration of conformity for the body of the vehicle from Dyson's, a fantastic vehicle manufacturer, that also stays with it. So this box is a clear record history of the vehicle and its maintenance, including our Lola inspections. So at any time that anybody wanted to question anything about the vehicle, or even some cases where we go to certain sites, they may even request that that vehicle is up to standard and conforms, we can clearly show that we are checking that.